Chair Edwards, we have 11 members present. If you wanted to wait a couple more minutes, we'll see who else jumps on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I got it. We're studying.
How are we doing, Pat?
Chair, we're at 12. We can begin if you'd like.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and convene the Valley Metro meeting for April 22nd. Would everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Pat, would you please do the roll?
Yes. City of Avondale, Vice Mayor Veronica Malone. City of Buckeye, Councilmember Clay Goodman.
Present.
City of Chandler, Mayor Kevin Hartke. City of El Mirage, Vice Mayor Monica Dorsey. Town of Fountain Hills, Councilmember Mike Sharnow.
Present.
Town of Gilbert, Mayor Bridget Peterson.
Here.
City of Glendale, Councilmember Lauren Talmachoff.
Here.
City of Goodyear, Vice Mayor Bill Stipp.
Present.
Maricopa County Supervisor Jack Sellers.
Here.
City of Mesa, Councilmember Francisco Heredia.
Here.
City of Peoria, Vice Mayor John Edwards.
Here.
City of Phoenix, Mayor Kate Gallego.
Jesus Sapiens here.
Mr. Sapien, will you be representing Valley Metro Rail today?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Town of Queen Creek, Councilmember Jeff Brown.
I'm here, thanks.
City of Scottsdale, Mayor David Ortega. City of Surprise, Councilmember Roland Winters. Councilmember, I have you if you are, we see you listed.
Okay,
City of Tempe, Councilmember Robin Arredondo Savage.
I'm here, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. City of Tolleson, Councilmember Adolfo Gamez.
I'm present.
Thank you. Town of Wickenburg, Mayor Rui Pereira. And Town of Youngtown, Mayor Michael LaVault. Mayor, we are ready to go.
I'm here, Pat. My unmute.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I have, we can see everyone. If you joined after I called your name, I'll go back through the participants and make sure I have everyone. So, Mr. Chair, we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Just wanted to do a special welcome to Councilmember Jeff Brown from the town of Queen Creek, Councilmember Adolfo Gamez from the city of Tolleson, and Councilmember Monica Dorsey from the city of El Mirage. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
If any member of the committee would like to ask any questions or make a comment during the meeting, please type in your comment in the box and it'll be read aloud and answered. All meeting attendees, please mute your phone or your computer at this time. Okay, so item number 1 on the agenda is the public comment. For today's public meeting, comment is being taken in the written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. Item number 2 is the executive officer's report. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all board members. Glad to see you, if not virtually, and only virtually. Looking forward to the time we can be back together in the boardroom. We have a good representation here of staff and others here in the Valley Metro Board, so looking forward to a time when you all are here also. To begin, I sort of got my papers off now, so Stephanie, if you could go to the first slide, please. Okay, there we go. Thank you. On March 22nd, we hosted a small socially distanced media event to celebrate the arrival of our first streetcar, first of 6 streetcars in our operations and maintenance center. This is the stellar staff, Mayor Corey Woods and Councilmember Robin Arredondo Savage and Tempe staff who participated in that. We recognize that we got really good media attention. As we do, and although I know that not all cities get rail, there's no doubt that when we talk about it, it does generate conversations about transit. And so I hope we all recognize the benefit that we have when we get good media coverage of any event that happens within the Valley Metro family. 8 different media covered the event, and it went very well. As part of that, or immediately following the media event, we hosted a tour for the staffs of Tempe, the mayor, Councilmember Arredondo Savage, Mesa Council Member and Valley Metro Rail Chair Francisco Heredia, Mesa City Manager Chris Brady, and the staff took a tour of all rail operations, including the major construction that's going on within that facility. And it's been under construction for well over a year, almost doubling the size of our rail operations center. And I would like to open the invitation to any of you, whether you have or don't have rail operations, to join us down there. We'd be more than happy to take you around to show you all the things that are going on. We're in the midst of about a $90 million expansion there to take advantage of all the new cars with our rail expansion. As a matter of fact, you can see right in the background there in the left-hand picture, that's one of our new Siemens vehicles. We have 6 of those on site, and when we open up our streetcar and other extensions, we'll actually have 3 different rail vehicles in our fleet. The existing Kikishario and now new Siemens LRVs, and then the streetcar that you just saw. On March 30th, city management and staff, City of Phoenix management staff also toured the construction project. So any of you are welcome. Just let us know, let Pat know, and we'd be more than happy to take you around. Next slide, please. We also are very, very pleased that about a month ago, we officially opened the very first and unique direct aid small business financial assistance program pilot. And the reason this is unique is that we have offered business assistance on all of our capital projects, whether they be rail or bus or anything, to stakeholders and businesses and others around the area. But for the first time, we're actually, well, let me back up. This assistance usually consists of business assistance, consulting, access, dealing with construction issues. And for the first time on this scale, we are offering direct aid. We have 2 tiers of aid, up to $3,000 or $9,000 based on designated business impact for those businesses that are absolutely directly impacted. This is a pilot program that's funded by the City of Phoenix through both their T2050 and PCDIC, and it also falls under that larger business assistance program. Even though we've been open right around a month now, we currently have nearly 50 businesses in the queue, and look forward to issuing payments in the next few days. We are out in the community, emailing, texting, even going door to door where possible to make sure that businesses understand the capabilities that we have. We recognize that anything we do does impact the community, and we try to be good neighbors, and we want to respect our stewardship in making sure that as we expand and increase our services, that we also take care of those people that are affected by those expansions. So thank you for the City of Phoenix stepping up and doing that funding. In the future, we have the schedule here, May 5th and 6th, TMC, RMC, and audit. The next Board of Directors meeting will be next May 20th. I also want to give you a little update about something which we raised what I raised last meeting, which we followed up with a letter to Mayor Edwards that we shared with all of you, and that is the discussion on the application of the most recent COVID relief plan that was passed recently and signed by the President. As we mentioned in the letter, we are working that through our normal process. We actually had a meeting of the Financial Working Group, which involves many of your staff, and they had a very good discussion as to the risks that we identified, the opportunities, and the needs of each city, because this is really driven by what you decide are your needs and the risks that you'd like to take. As I mentioned, this will be included in the transit life cycle plan analysis and review, which will come back to the board, I believe, in June for your consideration and action. And so your staff can give you updates, but this is working through the system, and we are getting good feedback and good input from your staff on the situation. Also want to let you know, remind you that May 20th board meeting, Paul Hodgins, our CFO, will present for your consideration and approval the next fiscal year budget. I hope you put it on your calendars, and if you can, we would love to have everyone here so we can have a good discussion about that most important issue. And Mr. Chair, that is my report.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Okay. Item number 3 would be the minutes. So the minutes for the March 8th, 2021 joint meeting are presented for approval. So I'm requesting a motion and a second to approve the March 18th, 2021 joint meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. I'll step.
Do I have a second?
Second, Lauren Tomachoff.
Thank you, Lauren. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, thank you. Item number 4 is the Audit and Finance Subcommittee update. I believe Vice Mayor Stitt is going to provide us an update.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I appreciate being able to do this. We had a remarkably brief meeting, if you consider an hour and 15 minutes brief, but for us, that was a miracle. We really had some very good discussions regarding the internal audit processes that are ongoing right now. Everything seems to be moving along. We're getting good, really a great energy going between the audit department and, to use audit lingo management. So we received a briefing on that. We also had a brief discussion on the bus advertising, which I believe is on the agenda for today. We also had some really good discussions regarding the 5-year operating assumptions for both Valley Metro Rail and RPTA, and what the future looks like as we move forward into these next 5 years, hopefully post-COVID. Pending any questions, that is our report.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. Item number 5 would be the Fair Inspection and Security Services Contract Awards. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is on the joint agenda, even though, as you can see in the summary, the vast majority of it is related to security on the rail system. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, since it does have a component that is related to the RPTA, and this is for security services at our Greenfield Road bus facility. But also, as we've mentioned, security on our rail does get public attention. It is noticed. It is a point of interest for media and other points, and so we thought it would be important that all of the board understand the security efforts and the program that goes on rail, since it does impact us across the board. I'm going to turn it over to both Adrian Rios, our Director of Safety and Security, and Don Schneidmiller, who specifically is in charge of rail security. They will give you an update as to this issue, which relates to the execution of a contract with Allied Universal Security. Adrian?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair and members of the joint boards. Along with Security Manager Don Schneidmiller, we're going to present today for the Fair Inspection Security Services Contract Award. As detailed in the memo, the panel selected the incumbent Allied Universal Protection Services. Prior to Don presenting on the budget piece, I want to take this opportunity to review the milestones and primary activities for the existing contract. As Scott mentioned, our apologies first for the heavy rail emphasis, but we want to also highlight there is a piece of this contract specific to the RPTA, Greenfield Bus Operations Facility, and Asset Security. So the personnel assigned to this contract are responsible for OMC security, post and patrol, dispatch communication and control, park and ride security, field system security, supervision, and recruitment. Next slide. During the existing term of the security services contract, we have worked to achieve several milestones, and the first being a mantra, and you'll hear this throughout the presentation, of presence matters, and a cultural shift to a customer service focus. This has also included a highlight to training and diversity, ethics and personal conduct, and behavioral pattern recognition. Over the last 5 years, we've increased security staffing 30% in response to customer input. This is an increase in also in incidents on board and at stations, and in response to stakeholders' requests to address rider satisfaction and security. I want to take a look at the next slide, which highlights some significant accomplishments and events over the last 5 years of the current contract. As you can see to the far left, during the month of October of 2017, and as another method to address stakeholder and customer security concerns, Valley Metro worked with city stakeholders to refresh the code of conduct. This included the development and install of refreshed signage and an establishment of clear paid fare zones. The adoption of the code of conduct by the board led to Respect the Ride. This has become a permanent forward-facing reminder to our ridership that we hear you and we want everyone to have access to a safe and peaceful transit experience. Alert VM, another key milestone here, was established as a ridership focus tool. This came into the hands of the ridership approximately 1 year later in November of 2018. This allowed for the riders to report non-emergencies and gave them a real-time communication tool. The feedback from ridership on the ability to communicate directly with customer service and ultimately a security member added a valuable multiplier in our response capability. Respond before an issue becomes an incident. Finally, another significant achievement occurred in October of 2019 When we modified our field deployment, thanks to the thinking outside the box of our security team and our security coordinator and Don, modified our field deployment, splitting the alignment into a west and east loop at 50th Street. We split the teams of 2 into solo teams, but working one train or one consist. The security members stayed on their respective car the entire trip until the end of line, where they then boarded the next train and returned to 50th Street Station. The response from riders was significant in customer service comments and kudos, and a decrease in incidents almost within days. As you can see by the decrease in the number of incidents prior to April 2020, we know that presence matters. I want to point out specifically, because we do recognize the fact that by March and April of 2020, as you can see to the right, we had the impacts of COVID slowly starting to show in the community. The key note here, although ridership was much lower, we still had an uptick in incidents starting in April of 2020. We can only presume this is because we had a decrease in the daily business school commuter and a shift in the ridership behavior and environment, with less eyes and ears acting as deterrents for the bad behavior. Unfortunately, during this time, we also had a significant increase in assaults on security. In response to this increase in security officer assaults, we shifted our staffing back to teams of 2 on 1 car. Next slide. I'd like to revisit the rider safety study conducted in July of 2019. Some key takeaways from this study, a specific focus on system safety and security, not health and safety, was that 54% of those surveyed noticed an increase in security. They see more security and noted an increase in rule enforcement and checking passes. So by this, we see that protecting the code of conduct and the respect to ride was actually working. So going back to the next slide, going back to the mantra of presence matters, it results in staffing increases of over 30% the last 5 years, modifications to deployment to cover each car with a security member. And keep in mind, we could only cover about 40 to 45% of the fleet during 2019. And the use of technology in the hands of our riders. We see 76% of those surveyed would continue riding light rail, and more significantly, 71% would recommend light rail. 47% said their perception of safety over the last year had improved. Next slide. Finally, what we have done over the last 5 years of this contract, again pre-COVID, is a move to incorporate the current contract provider into the Valley Metro family. Quarterly all-hands meetings, and we do hope to get back to these post-COVID, and we have obviously suspended them over the last year. Where all the members of the security services team were brought together in this room and the boardroom to review core values of personal and professional accountability, exemplary customer service, and going above and beyond in our performance. These quarterly all-hands meetings serve as a way to connect with security team members in a positive teamwork environment, recognize excellent performance, showcase training, and answer questions. This intrinsic added value is designed to thank those performing the work and make them part of the team. So we hope to get back to these in the next year or so. So now I'd like to turn it over the presentation to Don Schneidmiller, who will cover the budget portion and the selection process. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'll make it brief. This is the second time I've been through this type of process where we've initiated a request for proposal for a new security contract. And going into it, I was a little bit nervous, frankly, because you always worry about what the numbers are going to look like. I'm sure all of you do as well. The good news is our procurement division did a great job of putting together a proposal, and we had a very competitive, really competitive process. We had 11 companies that put in and met the criteria that we did a full evaluation on. That's a good thing. Competition brings good pricing generally, and that was certainly the case here. The thing I want to draw your attention to, just to get right to the point, other than Streetcar and the other project expansions that are going to be coming on the line in the next 4 years, we did not ask for anything new. So we're comparing apples to apples. So with the service levels remaining the same, costs are flat. They actually, I think we pay about $100,000 more in year 1 of the new proposed contract than what we're currently paying in year 5. And that's actually a savings because under the current contract, and again, we're in the 5th year of it, each year has about a 2% accelerator. So if we were to go into next year under the terms of the current contract, it would actually cost us about 150 grand more than what we're getting in year one of this new contract. So they came in with very aggressive pricing. I think a lot of that's due to the amount of competition they had. They did a good job of offering a slight pay raise to the position of fair inspector. That's got the highest billable hours, and that's where we suffer the most turnover. So they're bringing them in at a little more pay. And the flip side of that is the billable rate that they're charging us actually goes down a little bit. So they chose to dip directly into their margin to make themselves competitive in this process. So it was a good process. We got some good bids. Allied's a reputable company. They came in with a very competitive bid. Next slide, Pat, if you don't mind, please. So with that said, staff recommends that the board approves authorization for the CEO to execute a contract with Allied Universal Security Services for an amount not to exceed $52,332,000 for the total 5-year contract. It's a 3-year base contract with 2 one-year renewal options. Total contract value for VMR is $50,781,000, and for the RPTA, it's $1,551,000. I can certainly take questions on anything related to budget.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions? No questions. Pat, any hands raised? I don't see any.
No, there aren't any in the chat that I can see.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to request a motion and a second to authorize the CEO to execute a contract with Allied Universal Security for amount not to exceed $52,332,000 for the total 5-year contract, which includes a 3-year base contract with 2 one-year renewals, for a total contract value not for VMR $50,781,000, and for Valley Metro RPTA $1,551,000. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Bridget Peterson.
Thank you, Bridget. Do I have a second?
Second, Mike Charno.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item number 6 would be the cybersecurity assessment and next steps. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I go on with this, and before Adrian and Don sneak out of the room, I'd just like to give a real shout out to them. I think if you noticed on that graph that Adrian said, an incredibly successful effort in reducing incidents and making our rail system much safer. And that was not an easy accomplishment. That came through a lot of work from Adrian and Don and from Allied Universal. So I just wanted to recognize them and their efforts that they do an amazing job. And our system is safe. We're human. We do have incidents, but they do a great job. So thank you to the two of you. Now I'd like to move on to an area where we also is basically a security issue, because we're trying to protect ourselves and our system, like I know all of you are, and that is in the cybersecurity area. As part of this, we've conducted a cybersecurity assessment to try and identify where we have areas of weaknesses and strengths and risks. And I'd like to turn it over. Jim Hilliard, our Chief Administrative Officer, is the one who has overall responsibility for our IT department. But I'm going to turn over to our IT manager, which is Phil Oslin, and he will introduce the subject. Phil.
Thank you, Scott. Ladies and gentlemen of the board. In November, you approved our use of an external information security architect to assess our information security program and provide us with some guidance to improve. In today's presentation, that architect, Andy Jordan of New Genesis Solutions, will share with you his findings along with Valley Metro's plan for improvement in fiscal year 2022. His presentation is going to have 4 parts. He'll briefly highlight the cybersecurity threat environment that we face. He'll describe the standards that he used to evaluate Valley Metro's information security program and the grading scale used for those standards. He'll summarize his findings. And finally, he'll describe the 3 major steps that we'll be taking in the next year to improve. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jordan. Andy?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and members of the board. I appreciate the time. Why care about cybersecurity? This slide will have a little bit of animation. to it, but we're seeing cyber-related incidents continuing to cause significant operational and financial loss to organizations. This includes city governments and agencies. This includes U.S. rail and transportation. This includes international rail and transportation systems, as well as other companies that have suffered incidents, but can provide insight on how we're seeing cybersecurity continue to evolve as an attack threat to our organization. There's one more animation, and then we'll go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I think with this one, we're going to see there's a lot of different stories out there. There has been attacks on transportation agencies, but I think the San Francisco BART incident is an important one to review because not only were the IT systems impacted, but there was a financial loss due to passengers that were allowed to ride free for 2 weeks. The worst story in transportation and rail specifically was in 2008, where a teenager took control of trains and caused multiple derailments. And the key point here is that transit is a target. Cyber attacks on transit include both financial and operational attacks and have resulted in injuries. We're also seeing that in our graph of cybersecurity insurance claims, this is just insurance. So there is a larger number of organizations that experience cybersecurity incidents but do not file an insurance claim. What we can see from the numbers is across all sectors, public entities are seen as a soft target and are increasingly being attacked. So from that aspect, we're seeing that, while Valley Metro is not a financial institution, we don't have national security things that we're preventing. It does have significant exposure to cybersecurity risks, and we must use national security standards to help guard against these types of attacks. And so that's the threat framework or the cyber attack framework or surface that we're looking at. If we can kind of go ahead in transitioning to kind of where that assessment was, want to kind of set the stage a little bit for that. So Valley Metro's information security program started in 2017. And through this assessment, I used two frameworks. The first was the NIST cybersecurity standard, which was and is the requirement here for us, as well as Carnegie Mellon's Capability Maturity Model Index, which gives us an ability to understand where we are in maturity through these. This is a little bit deeper detail on the NIST or National Institutes of Standard and Technology and their cybersecurity framework. It describes 108 specific controls that are grouped into 5 domains and reflects, the overarching information security lifecycle. So while I won't discuss individual components of that, we're open for questions along the side of how those were impacted to Valley Metro. As we get into the CMMI model, this really helps, as I mentioned earlier, identify not only where an organization is at, but the different abilities to improve their maturity through those different parts. So if you're looking for a general analogy, CMMI level 1 would be considered kind of a D, level 2 would be considered a C. If we could go back one slide, I apologize. It's just easier to look while describing this for us all. Level 1 is a D, level 2 would be considered a C, level 3 would be a B, level 4 would be an A, and 5 would be an A+, or would be considered a world-class organization that is connected across. So when we looked at Valley Metro and kind of where we are, we see an improvement over time, which is fantastic. And I think ultimately what we're looking at today is Valley Metro sits at about a C+ or a B- if we want to use that positioning. As we look at this is at CMMI level, we're seeing Valley Metro today at a 2.78. Next slide, please. In looking at the specific domains and where we are today, we're very strong here at Valley Metro around detection and recovery. However, we need to make some improvements across identification and protection of these risks. Next slide, please. This is a little bit more detail in terms of what that roadmap looks like for us. So in building out that roadmap over the next 2 years, we're going to see that my recommendation is that it should be annually that's a hard word to say, annually, we'll skip it, reviewed and continuously improved. And so in looking at that for the next 12 months, where we're going to see some of those identification and protection things, we're conducting an octave risk assessment. It uses a national model to identify risks and to mitigate them. Next thing we're performing is third-party penetration tests, which will identify and validate where we are as an organization for preventative and proactive mitigation. And then the next one is information security program reassessment, which will kind of identify our progress and any gaps that we need across the plan. And with that, that is the highlight of where the assessment was conducted and where we are today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Is there any questions or comments?
Yes, Chair, there is a question from Councilmember Tomachoff. What is the difference between identification and detection?
I can take it. So identification is the ability to know where our data is and information. Detection is our ability to actually determine when our information is being accessed.
Okay, so identification doesn't have anything to do with identifying a risk?
It does, certainly. Identification is about identifying our risks relating to, what information we have. And then obviously, trying to figure out, what we can do from a risk profile on managing that through.
Okay, that's why I was just curious, because it looked like we were doing a lot better on detection than identification. So it seems like if you were able to identify the risk, then you would be able to. So that's what I was curious about. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chair, there is a question from Vice Mayor Stipp. What is the plan going forward?
So, Vice Mayor, this is Jim Hilliard. Let me summarize that a little bit, and then I'll ask Andy and Oz to jump in if I've missed anything. So, if we could go back to the last slide in the presentation, please. So, as Andy highlighted, and it was just noted, we're strongest really in the area of detection, our ability to identify when we have a potential cyber intrusion because of the tools that we have in place. Our two weakest places are in, as was just noted, identifying risks. What are the possible things that could happen? And then what are the proactive things that we could do to ensure against those? And so there's a number of individual NIST standards that we'll be working on. But they generally fall into those two areas since those are the two weakest links in our chain right now. The two major things that we'll be doing to address those, and there's a bunch of smaller things that will also be happening. The first is this octave risk assessment that was mentioned. So octave is a national framework that starts out by identifying all of your critical functions and who's involved in those critical functions. Then it takes those people who are involved in critical functions and asks, okay, what are the possible risk vectors here? What things could go wrong and how would that impact you? It then rates those on a scale of likelihood on the one hand and impact if it were to happen on the other hand in order to prioritize them. And then then it starts at the top of the list with the highest priorities and works down into, okay, now what are we going to do to protect against those? So it's squarely in that identification and protection domain where we know we need the most improvement. And so that's really a key first step. And one of the important things about it is it's not limited to information security. It involves the entire organization from top to bottom, and IT is just one aspect of that, whereas physical security in Adrian's realm is another aspect of that. So we started that process last year in identifying our critical functions. And who was involved in them. And in fact, it was very helpful for us when the pandemic took hold, because it helped us sort of plan for how we would maintain our critical functions in the pandemic environment. What we need to do this year is really dive into okay, what are the non-pandemic risks that we could face for each of those critical functions? Prioritize those and then put in place proactive protection measures. So that's probably the single most important thing that we'll be doing this year. As I say, we're picking up where we left off last year. We've already been at that for a couple of months now, but it ends up being about a 6 or 7 month process because it's so detailed. And if anyone would like to know more about that, we'd be delighted to meet with you offline and sort of walk you through the process. It's pretty interesting. The other important thing we'll be doing that's more technologically oriented is this penetration testing that was noted. New Genesis's assessment found that we were fairly strong in the detection area, but of course that's closing the the barn door after the horse is left. Andy will be bringing back other members of the team, and he and his team will essentially be acting as hackers, and they'll be attacking our organization. They'll be doing it through purely technical means, like can we exploit websites and systems that you've created, and they'll also be doing it by trying to trick our staff with simulated phishing emails, because I think as the city of Kingman found out, that's the single biggest risk vector that organizations experience today, is just people not paying attention and allowing malware to be downloaded onto their systems. So they'll conduct that penetration test, and that will provide us with an agenda of where we need to strengthen our abilities to protect, both technically and in terms of the human factor and training. And then finally, as we conclude those major activities, New Genesis will come back and they'll reassess using the same standards of this assessment to see where have we closed gaps, where's progress been made, how are we in each of those 5 domains at the end of the year as compared to where we are now at the beginning of the year, and then we'll adjust our action plan for the upcoming year accordingly. So there's a number of deeper steps that work specifically on standards that we need to improve on, but it's not a good idea for have a detailed discussion of that in an open forum, because of course that would provide a roadmap for anyone who is looking to do us harm. So at a high level, those are our next major steps, and we'll be coming back to you in approximately a year so you can see where we've had growth and where we need to continue to focus.
And that's all included within the current contract that we have with them?
It is, and Vice Mayor, what you'll see, one of the things we're looking to do going forward with IT contracts is, I think the way that we've been presenting those contracts heretofore, which is sort of bringing them up as they expire, onesies, twosies, hasn't been providing the best service to the board, because what it doesn't do is allow you to see a holistic view of what we're spending, whether it's with contractors or software or anything else. And so actually next month to the board, we'll be bringing a single memo that shows all of the IT consulting in one memo, and then all of the software in another memo for the upcoming fiscal year. And so you'll see all of the cost for New Genesis Consulting in that memo in one place, in addition to everything else we're doing from a consulting perspective for a one-stop shop. I'll just tell you as a preview, this initial assessment was heavy lifting for the New Genesis team. Their refresh of it next year will take less hours and therefore be less costly than it was this year, because they're working off a known baseline and they don't have to sort of create all of the additional context to start. We will have them be doing the third-party penetration testing, which they didn't do this year, and so the cost year to year on kind of an annualized basis is basically a push. I think their cost is down about 10% year over year on an annualized basis, but that'll be coming before you in the board meeting next month.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add to what Jim's already said is to tie back to something that you mentioned earlier in the AFS brief, Vice Mayor Stipp. As we've been going through this risk assessment process, we've been working hand in hand with Ms. Beckstrom and Internal Audit.
Okay. Chair, there are a few more questions coming in over the chat. This question is from Mayor Bridget Peterson. For proactive, are we looking at new IT systems procedures or professional systems as we are looking at purchasing new systems?
I'll take a quick crack at that one again. So our proactive protection is primarily us identifying those risk vectors and then changing the way that we're operating internally. For the most part, we're not talking about new software or new consulting. These are almost entirely us configuring things that we already have to make intrusion and exploits more difficult. We are absolutely looking at cybersecurity as an important component of any new software that we're bringing in. So for example, Paul's in the process of implementing our new enterprise resource system. And so looking at the security protections of that system were part of how it was evaluated and was selected in the RFP that occurred last year. So we're definitely weaving this into all things going forward. But mostly what we're doing now is just applying knowledge to make things better, not necessarily buying new things.
Okay. The next question is from Councilmember Clay Goodman. How many threats have been detected over the past 12 months?
I don't have that information at my fingertips, but I would be happy to pull that after this meeting and get it to you.
Okay, thank you, Oz. A follow-up question from Councilmember Goodman. Will the phishing campaign be managed internally or through a vendor? What steps will be taken to help employees with the issue?
So the phishing campaign will be done using a third-party tool, but the personnel managing it will be a mix of internal and our consultants from New Genesis Solutions. And then once the findings are back from that, we will work, we in the IT department will work with our training group to assist, assist any of the folks that have issues or could benefit from some additional instruction in that area.
And Oz, if I could just add to that very quickly for the board's context. So as Oz mentioned, we've got a subscription with a third-party product that creates simulated phishing emails and blasts them out to our staff on a regular basis. And if the staff click the link in the email, IT gets a notification that there's someone who needs training, and the employee gets the sort of wah, 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 sad sound that you fell for it, please don't do that again. And we use that for ongoing training. And so I think what Andy's team will do is create sort of more sophisticated phishing emails that'll be launched through that same tool as a way of seeing if they can trick our staff into clicking the links at a higher rate than we've been tricking our staff. I think that the good news is our simulations over the last year, we've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of folks clicking links and a dramatic increase in the percentage of folks that are reporting emails as phishing. So we've seen good progress there, but we need to continue to test ourselves.
Councilmember Tomachoff, does that answer your question regarding staff inadvertently allowing malware into the system?
For the most part, however, if you're basically, I mean, is there an education piece to that? I know in Glendale, they've implemented basically like they send you a link and you have to do the training, and I don't love doing the training, but I understand the reason for it. But it's basically a set of modules that everybody has to complete, and if you don't do it, you're going to get locked out. But it's more educational rather than just sending phishing emails saying, "Uh-oh, you opened it." But there's different types of even things that you could be doing on social media that may put the organization at risk and things like that.
Certainly, that is actually something that we do as well. We have regular monthly trainings that go out on a variety of topics, usually picked around the sort of relevant current events. The phishing emails are in addition to that to make sure that the training has taken root, and we keep a measure of what percentage of people are attending and passing the trainings. And if we have someone that's struggling with some of the evaluations that come after the training or the phishing, we do have some remedial training programs for them. So it is, education is the first step, and then testing the second.
Okay, thank you.
Chair that or
And I can attest for that because usually when they send out phishing emails, it comes from allegedly me. And so figuring that if the CEO sends an email, you automatically respond to it. So I get a lot of feedback from staff when I send out a supposed email that doesn't look quite right. So they do a great job of ongoing training. At least every month we complete a formal class. Everybody in the organization does that.
Chair, that was all the questions that came through on the chat.
Okay, thank you. Great conversation. Look forward to hearing more about it later when you have more results. Appreciate it. Okay, item number 7 is the travel expenditure and solicitations. This item is presented for informational only. Is there any questions on travel or expenditures? Okay. Item number 8 is future agenda request. Are there any members that have an item that they'd like to place on a future agenda meeting? All right. Item number 9 is our next meeting. Our next meeting for the Valley Metro Board is scheduled for Thursday, May 20th, 2021 at 11:15. And with that, that concludes the joint meeting, and we will now start the RPTA board meeting. Okay. So with that, we are convening the meeting at 12:06 for the RPTA meeting. The first item on the agenda is the public comment. For today's meeting, the public comment is being taken in written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. Item number 2 is the minutes for the March 18, 2021 meeting are presented for approval. So I'm requesting a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes for March 18, 2021.
So moved, Kevin Herkey.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Second. It's Lauren.
Thank you, ma'am. So we have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, thank you so much. The consent agenda is presented for action. Is there any board member that has any questions or items that need to be pulled prior to discussion? No? Okay, so I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
Approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, Lauren. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, consent agenda carries. Item number 4 is the proposed October 2021 service changes. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do not have a formal presentation on this item because these are service changes that will be proposed for October and are going out to the public. But I would suggest if you have not looked at the memo, if you could look at it because the changes are pretty substantial and probably higher than what we average normally put out. And just to give you a little bit of a background, through the pandemic, we have maintained as best we can levels of service and maintained the routes that we serve. And this is probably the first real indication of an adjustment that are based primarily on right sizing our system and taking and creating efficiencies based on actual ridership. And so a lot of these are, I would say most of these are presented by your city staff and suggestions as to what cities would like and are willing to fund. So please look through these. If you have specific questions, I suggest that you call Joe Gregory or Carol Ketcherside or have your staff bring it up. But these are a product of the service group, the service group. And Mr. Chair, unless there are specific questions, we won't have a presentation on this item.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Don't see any. Okay. Item number 5 is the Valley Metro RPTA fixed bus route advertising. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For many, many years, one of the items of discussion in public transportation is the appropriateness or desirability of including placard advertising on the outside of transit assets. We're no different, meaning we here in the Phoenix region. And as you know, driving around, there are advertisements on Valley Metro buses that are operated by the city of Phoenix. There are also advertisements and wraps on our rail cars that are operated by Valley Metro Rail. But since its inception, Valley Metro RPTA has not allowed advertising. In fact, there are even some of our cities that have specific ordinances that preclude advertising. Since we have this situation where we seem to be somewhat schizophrenic in our approach to advertising for the overall transit system, and due to financial and other considerations, this issue came up specifically most recently in the Audit and Finance Subcommittee. And so staff decided to update not update, but to look into and present to you, the board, both a history and an update as to advertising and what it means, and perhaps seek some guidance from you as to how to go forward with this question. So I'm going to turn it over now to Hillary Foos, our Communications Director, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Scott. Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you so much for your time. If you can go to the next slide. Scott really opened it very well. So advertising is very much a subjective conversation. It's something that's been debated probably in your homes after the Super Bowl. It's what we talk about. And certainly that's no different for transit agencies. Across the country, many transit agencies do advertise, and we'll show you what some of our peers do, and many don't. We'll also give you the history of what's happened here in this region, talking specifically about board actions that this board has historically taken. And we'll also talk about, in addition to the history, some of the challenges and concerns that we should be mindful of as we consider about moving forward or not. And also the opportunities, really the revenue opportunity really associated with potentially moving a program forward for the RPTA operated fleet, again, our peers, and what potential next steps could be. Next slide. So a little bit about transit vehicle advertising history in our region. Again, as Scott said, we're focused with this with these milestones on bus exterior advertising. There's a lot of bus shelter and station advertising that happens here in our region. These milestones are really specific to buses. So on the left side of your screen are really the two prior RPTA board actions. It was discussed in 1994 and in 2000. And at the time, the RPTA board did not move forward with advertising on its fleet. And you can see the mentions there. There were concerns about image, about clutter, about safety, about overall system identity. There were also references to just general lack of personal preference. I should also note that the City of Phoenix, as Scott mentioned, City of Phoenix does advertise on the exterior of their buses, and they advanced that opportunity in 1994. On the right side of your screen is our rail program here in the Valley. There's been more activity on the Valley Metro Rail side. In 2003, the Valley Metro Rail Board decided to adopt a policy but not allow it at that time. As in 2003, we weren't quite open yet, so there was this idea that they may want to pursue advertising, but it wasn't something they moved forward with. What really sparked initial interest was a major event, which was the NBA All-Star Game in 2008 that was being hosted in downtown Phoenix. They piloted some advertising with that All-Star Game to see how the community would respond to it. They subsequently moved forward with creating a policy and moving forward with CBS Outdoor as the advertising administrator for the program. Between 2010 and 2014, the Valley Metro Rail Board progressively opened up our advertising policy, allowing for more advertising inventory, as well as opening up our advertising standards. And in 2015, the Valley Metro Rail Board renewed a contract with CBS Outdoor, now Outfront Media, to continue to be the advertising administrator for the program, and the program continues today. We felt it was incumbent upon us as we have this conversation to really bring forward to the board really the challenges and opportunities with pursuing an advertising program, really to create an honest context for this conversation as we are seeking your guidance today. I am going to go over a couple of these bullets really quickly. There is a natural conflict with transit vehicles also being advertising vehicles. The heart of our transit vehicles are to provide service. They are not to be advertising vehicles. And naturally, there can be friction to that, scheduling friction, but also why they exist. And so that comes to play also related to advertising content. So what are the advertisements themselves? And there always are potential concerns about controversial ads that sort of run on the edge of our advertising standards, maybe advertising that offends our personal sensibilities. So advertising content is always one of those areas that provides a level of concern. Let's talk about regional branding, which is very important to, I know, this board and our region. For the first time, really, in our history, we have a unified paint scheme between City of Phoenix and Valley Metro RPTA on our buses and our trains and our streetcars, which does more than just paint scheme. It really does provide an excellent rider experience. It does provide a unified branding. It really does help the way that our system is seen by the public, helping in things like when we think about Prop 400 extension, how is our system viewed, and giving it ultimately a good image of our system, and covering up that paint scheme with advertising, with wraps. It does have an impact on that branding. Maintenance, wear and tear, goes without saying. As you could imagine, putting advertising on the exterior of our fleet has maintenance issues. While our advertising administrator is always very responsive to any damage, it's very strong language within our contract that they return that vehicle to its original condition. It does just create wear and tear, and it's something to manage. Speaking of management, right now on the Valley Metro Rail side, that management is really done by Valley Metro staff. Staff at our maintenance facilities and staff here at the 101 building. We manage the contract, we manage the contractor, obviously we schedule the fleet, et cetera. As we think about pursuing bus advertising on the RPTA side, we have contractors engaged. And so if we were to move forward, that effort could be borne by our contractors and could create contract changes and potentially increase costs. And last but not least, our public safety concerns. We've heard this throughout our duration with advertising. Obviously, our experience is on the Valley Metro Rail side, but with full coverage advertising like wraps, they do create visibility concerns for law enforcement and emergency responders because they do cover the windows. And while we do have some mitigations where there's greater perforation on the windows, it still does create some concerns and some risk that we should be mindful of. And we've heard from our law enforcement partners about that risk and concern. But the opportunity here, thinking about both sides of the coin, is really revenue. And so we asked Outfront Media, just for a magnitude of order, take a look at our fleet. What could we possibly generate if you were given our fleet to advertise upon? This estimate was built, obviously, during a time of a pandemic, so it's a bit of a unique market to be advertising in. But this is what they proposed to generate somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000 for Valley Metro. And this is based on the Valley Metro Rail formula, where we get 65% of the net revenues. So based on that formula, we would get somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000 for potentially allowing.
Mention Phoenix's revenue.
Yeah, so just for a basis of comparison, I know my colleagues from the City of Phoenix are on this call. City of Phoenix has a very established bus advertising program, and in 2019, they generated $1.6 million from their exterior bus advertising. So just to give you a sense of context in the region.
Which is consistent, since the Phoenix fleet is about 2 times our size and also operates in an urban area. So we think that this outfront estimate is pretty reasonable, considering what Phoenix is actually generating. Mm-hmm.
In terms of our peers, we thought it was fair that, in addition to continue to give you context about advertising in the transit industry, 5 out of the 6 peers we surveyed, primarily our peers in the Western United States, do utilize bus advertising. They offer the full range of products. There are a few exceptions, Houston being a primary example, where they have an overall Keep Houston Beautiful ordinance, where they're very restrictive on signage within the Metro Houston area. And also UTA, which is obviously Salt Lake City, they did something interesting where they do allow bus advertising, but they created a more balanced approach where their advertising still has to allow for their logo to be present. And so that image on the right there is actually a UTA bus with the advertising in the middle, and just above the wheel on the top of the bus, you can see the UTA logo. So they created an advertising program that, you know, attempted to balance that branding with the advertising opportunity. Next slide. So the question before us today is really, while there's been I've given you the history and some of the pros and cons with advertising, is this something we wanted to pursue for the Valley Metro RPTA operated fleet? We feel if so, it's something, if you go to the next slide, there are a few examples of, if so, we think that we can create a balanced program, achieving brand, you know, balancing those concerns. But we do look for guidance and feedback today.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, this is not an action item. As Hillary said, we are looking for guidance, direction as to whether to pursue. As you can see, it's perhaps not a yes or no answer, as it might be a yes but or a no but, depending on whether there is additional information. You can see some examples as to where you could pursue advertising with a balancing effect. So we're just looking for guidance and direction from the board as to where we should go to develop a specific proposal to bring back to the board at a later time.
Got it. Thank you. All right, so there's got to be some questions out there. I don't see any on the chat yet, but does anybody have any comments or questions?
Through the chair, Kevin Herkey.
Yes, Kevin.
I do have a few. You had mentioned in the beginning that some cities had ordinances preventing this. Are those? And then you mentioned Houston as one as a large city. So are there valley cities that have that would, in order for this to happen, there would have to be some changes in their ordinances, or do you know that?
So, Mr. Chair, Mayor Harkey, we did, and Paul, please jump in, because I know this was a discussion at the financial working group with some of the member cities. It's our understanding that from what we've heard, I think from Scottsdale and even the city of Tempe, that what we've seen from our cities that do have sign ordinances, that it wouldn't prevent us from moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah, just add, some of the cities do have ordinances, but it's specifically for more specific to fixed, like a bus shelter or something that's fixed within the city. A vehicle driving through wouldn't necessarily be subject to that.
Well, we have to answer that question, and we'll need to go out to each city, because it's not clear as to whether the cities would be asked, if we adopted this, whether they would be asked to amend or clarify their specific ordinance. That's one issue we'd have to clarify with specific cities. The biggest operator would be Tempe, and how it relates to their ordinance, since that's where a large percentage of our bus operations are. And we just have to follow up with Tempe staff and Councilmember Aradona Savage to make sure that we're in sync with whatever ordinance they have.
And we are working closely with Tempe staff on this item.
It's doable.
I have two other questions. Number two, you had mentioned generating income, but you also mentioned in the earlier part about maintenance. And it would seem that since Phoenix has got a long history with buses, what's an accurate delta or net that we could possibly realize with this, based upon Phoenix's experience with the maintenance of these buses, with the wrapping or other types of things?
So, Mr. Chair, Mayor Harkey, thank you for the question. I think that would be part of our continued research. So the number that we presented to you, that was a forecast from Outfront Media, that 865,000 number, obviously does not account for any changes we would need to make to our contracts with our service providers. I think, and we work closely with the city of Phoenix to understand their history with it. We've had many conversations with the city of Phoenix about how their programs has moved forward, and we will continue to do so. So I don't have an answer for that right now, but that will be part of an action item for us as we move forward.
And lastly, I'm assuming this is a upfront price, or in terms of that 800 plus figure there. I assume we would do an RFP to see if there was a better price. You had mentioned CBS, I think, earlier with the basketball thing. Would this be something that we would plan if the decision of the board in the future was to advertise, is to see where we could get the best deal with that?
So, Mr. Chair, Mayor Harkey, CBS Outdoor and Outfront Media are the same company. CBS Outdoor became Outfront Media. And when we scoped Outfront Media's contract, when we did the RFP where Outfront Media was selected back in 2015, in that scope of work, there were future potential scope additions for bus advertising and van pool advertising, actually. So we feel it's within Outfront's existing contract. Obviously, we would negotiate the structure and the rate and the program around bus advertising, but it was part of the scope of work when we issued that competitively back in 2015.
And so one follow-up with that, when are they up for a bid again with existing contracts? So there potentially could be, and I don't have a horse in this, but I'm always looking, how do we do best? That was 6 years ago. When is this up for next renewal or next look to see if someone else is a better competitor?
Mr. Chair, Mayor Harkey, thank you for these questions. We are in our, obviously it was up to an 11-year agreement with Outfront Media, 5-year base, and we're in the 3-year option period. So in
2 years?
Yeah, so in about a year and a half, we would be outside of that 3-year option, and there would be another point of action where we could renew for another 3 years. So, so at about a year and a half.
Okay, thank you.
To the chair.
Okay. It's like we've got a couple more questions out there.
Chair, there is a question from Councilmember Tomachoff. What other costs are associated with the contract?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Tomachoff, can you clarify what you
on
mean
your
by other
slide,
costs?
on your slide where you talked about the $800 and some $1,000 revenue, there was a point on the bottom about other costs on whatever slide that was.
Yes. So that's referring to, thank you for the clarifying. That's referring to anticipated contract changes to our service provider relationships for them to help us execute this program. So as an example, as you know, in the East Valley, First Transit is our service provider for our East Valley bus services. They schedule the buses, they maintain the buses. We would likely need to adjust their scope because there's no reference of helping support manage this type of bus advertising program in their current scope of work. And so there's likely scope changes and potential cost changes associated with adding this to their scope. As to what degree or what level that would be part of future research that we would do in consultation with our bus operations team.
Yeah, and the other potential cost, which we luckily we have a lot of history between City of Phoenix and us and the rail, is the cost to maintain. You know, there is wear and tear on vehicles. There sometimes has to be some touch paint up. We have an idea of where that would be and what that would be, but that would also be part of the cost. It's not huge, it's manageable, but that would be another cost that would be incurred.
Okay, if I could, Mr. Chair, I have basically a follow-up to that. Well,
Sure.
Considering, I mean, if we decided, if the board's decision was to move forward with this and we were to go ahead and pursue, because the pie itself gets bigger, is there anything in the contract that would allow us to to negotiate a bigger piece of the pie if we're going to be adding a lot more, advertising opportunity? Or is it just strictly I think you said 65-35 is that baked into the contract and ironclad? Or if we say, well, you're going to be able to make a lot more money because we're giving you way more, opportunity.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Tomachov, that 65% is the Valley Metro Rail rate. And so if we were to move forward with bus advertising, and that would be part of a negotiation with Outfront Media. So that 65% would be negotiated, or whatever that rate would be determined to be. So I can't say right now it'd be part of a forthcoming negotiation with Outfront Media, but your point is well taken.
And one more question, if I could, Mr. Chair. What in your research with other places where they do advertising, what is the share, the split?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Tomachov, our share is rather good. We're for Valley Metro Rail, which is the only thing I could speak to right now. 65% is rather good. Normally, it's in the 50-60% range. So 65% is rather good. I would say it's on the top end. We did well in terms of our negotiation at the time.
Okay.
And one reason.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. One of the reasons for that is
move on from me. I just want to say that I think this is at least worth taking another step forward and pursuing getting a little more information, but I don't see why we wouldn't do this. That's my thought on it. I mean, we'd have to definitely control the type of advertising and how the advertising looked and all of that. Although I don't know, I've never had anybody say to me, the City of Phoenix buses, the Valley Metro buses look so much nicer than the City of Phoenix buses. I really don't think people pay all that much attention to it. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councilmember. One thing to take in note is that one reason we're a little shy on applying what we've learned on Valley Metro Rail is it's a different environment because the trains are bigger. They're bigger billboards, and they run through the middle of the city, and they're much more noticeable than buses are. So we do command a higher rate and a higher percentage there than you might maybe on buses. And the other thing is that we're going to look at in the market is that there's no doubt that the City of Phoenix buses run through a more dense, for the most part. They're in the urbanized area. We run a lot of routes out in the suburban areas, and whether that equates to a difference, we don't know. That's one of the things we're going to look at. But you can see that there could be a difference in the potential just because our buses don't run in the same area as either the trains or most of the City of Phoenix does. It may be the same. We don't know. We're just going to ask the question.
Okay. Vice Mayor Stipp, I know you had a few questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair. There is a comment from Councilmember Sharnow before we get to Vice Mayor Stipp and Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Councilmember Sharnow put in the chat, I feel it is worth pursuing a proposed policy since it appears other jurisdictions, even those within the Valley, have successfully overcome most challenges. That was just his statement. So
Okay.
I wanted to make sure we got that in.
Great, Mr. Chair, thank you. I was looking for more balance in the presentation, I guess, and we talk about, well, historically the board has not wanted advertising on the RPTA board has not wanted advertising, and the last decision that was made by this board was in 2000. So I don't know that we've got a long history other than in 2000 we decided not to advertise. And I'm concerned about the comments that Prop 400 extension may be impacted if we wrap the buses and and the public safety concerns. Clearly, the public safety concerns aren't an issue if we're wrapping the trains the way that we've wrapped them. So what's our real take on these public safety concerns that you said it during AFS that we've heard from our public safety partners, but if that was such a concern, why are we wrapping the trains, which
Mr.
have
Chair.
no way of moving?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chair, Vice Mayor Stipp. To answer the public safety concerns question, we are actually in the process of reevaluating at this exact moment full train wraps on the Valley Metro Rail fleet because of some of the concerns that were expressed here today, and also to balance branding, public safety, and the complexity, frankly, of maintaining our growing fleet. And so, so I appreciate your comments. I understand where they're coming from. It does feel a bit conflicted, what you're seeing out in the field versus the discussion here today. And we've been having that discussion on the Valley Metro Rail side of the House. So appreciate those comments. As to the comment about Prop 400, I'm not at all asserting that that would be in jeopardy. I was purely making a comment about our brand image in the region, and I think there's a way to certainly balance brand with advertising.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. And Councilmember, really, this is very much a straightforward question, but it's very subjective in some ways. And the question is you talk to people and they either accept advertising as a normal or they're offended by it. And that's personal preference. We've just tried to present what the arguments we've heard, not from 20 years ago, on an ongoing basis. The question is whether those challenges are significant to offset the revenue that comes in. That's really what it boils down to. $865,000 is not a whole lot of money in the scheme of things, but it's nothing to sneeze at. It's sizable. So we believe that it warrants a consideration. And the fact is that if we believe, as the times have changed, and we've proven successfully with the City of Phoenix program, with our rail program, that we have been able to have those coexist. I think, as Hillary said, we do want to take an opportunity to find out, if we do move forward, that we take into consideration some of the things we have learned from the train. This public safety just came up recently with our derailment. We had some comments from some of the public safety. It was a little bit disconcerting for them to walk up to a train that had been just gone and they couldn't see inside the train because it was completely wrapped. When you hear things like that, it brings to the forefront, well, are we doing it the right way? There are ways around the world and around the country where they do balance those out. What that usually means is that if you reduce the size of the billboard, you reduce the revenue potential. So it gets back to, is the revenue sufficient? How do you want to do it? We're agnostic. As you said, we currently operate successful advertising programs here. It is a little bit off that RPTA does not do advertising, but that's because of the history, because we have had a formal policy. So we will take whatever direction the board gives us and move forward with that, and to provide some more information and details on some of the questions. So you can make a decision, yes or no. We will provide maybe some adjustments, and we might go back to the VMR board and provide perhaps some adjustments to that existing program, just so we can handle some of these issues that we brought up.
Okay, I appreciate that. And, I think, it's a matter of how we're trying to present the issue. I do have two actual legitimate questions, though. There's been a lot of talk about, having to renegotiate with our current provider. City of Phoenix has a provider. Is the suburban route's going to have an impact on it, et cetera. There just seems to be so much question about about adding, this next wave of buses and advertising potential. I have to question why we're not actually going to go out for an RFP to advertise on the buses. We have one with the trains. Why would we not take advantage of today's activities and today's component, especially if we have to renegotiate with Outfront? Why would we not try to get out into into the commercial space now and see if there's an opportunity. The last month or so, every bus that has come into Goodyear has had advertising on it from the city of Phoenix. And I think we either have an opportunity to either add on to their existing contract or we go out for a current RFP. But either way we go, I think we have an obligation to the taxpayers of the region and to our users to try to maximize all of our revenue potential, and advertising is just one of them. And with that, I think that ends my questions and comments.
And Mr. Chair, if I might, since there is no existing contract, even with our existing, we would need to come back to the board for specific approval regardless of which route we took. So we're looking at all options on that, and I appreciate the input. We're not fixed on any one thing because even our rail, the contract is with VMR. So we would have to come back to the board if we piggybacked on existing contracts such as the City of Phoenix, whatever. So we'll be back to you before there is any formal action taken.
Chair, there's questions from Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Yes, Robin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, ma'am. Just a couple things, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on a couple things. Of course, I do think, the city of Tempe probably does have a pretty stringent sign ordinance. Actually, I know that we do. So I appreciate them acknowledging that and working with the city of Tempe and our staff to just see if there's a way to possibly get through that. I certainly understand that. I'm just wondering if and I'm not opposed to moving forward and doing a little bit more research and seeing what this looks like and how we could, find a way around some of those public safety concerns. If that's a big concern with public safety, that's a big concern for me. But I would think that there might be an opportunity to figure out how we work with that. But I'd like to, take the time to maybe hear some information from Phoenix. Obviously, they've been doing this for a while. They probably have an idea of what some of those pros and cons, the concerns, and how it's really implemented them. So I mean, them being a really big partner in our region, I think it would be advantageous for us to take some time in here. I know Mayor Gallego's not here today. I know Jesus is here, and I wouldn't expect them to give us any type of a presentation, but it would be really nice, I think, to hear from them and share their processes and what they do and how they've either appreciated it or been concerned about it along the way. So just a couple things from my thought process, but I'm not afraid to at least do a little bit more digging and see if this is something like I think the Vice Mayor said. I feel like we need to do our due diligence and see if this is something that is worth moving forward on and will help us kind of offset some of our continued expense. And then also, I mean, Hillary, you did a really great job. And one thing you keep mentioning is our growing fleet. I'm just wondering if you are incorporating the growing fleet within these numbers, and if not, what possibly could those look like? So, I mean, I guess not necessarily questions for today, but some information I'd like to have if we do move forward. Chair Edwards, thank you.
Good feedback. Thank you.
Chair, there is a comment from Councilmember Brown. Will we look into any possibility that the feds have regulations related to wraps or advertising that might jeopardize grants or stimulus funds? And then Mayor Bridget Peterson has a comment.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Brown. Yeah, thank you. Advertising is used across the United States, the transit agencies across the United States. There are not any federal concerns here that would curb our ability to get or receive federal funding. Thank you for the question.
Chair, Bridget Peterson from Gilbert. My biggest concern would be content of the signs. And if you don't know, Gilbert's already been involved in quite a process. If there's members that haven't heard of that, they can just Google Reed versus Gilbert and find out what I'm referring to. But that would be my biggest concern from how do we handle that as we're moving forward? So I definitely agree with Robin that we move forward with this idea and get some more input. I think Hillary did a great job outlining all of the pros and cons and looking at bringing this forward to look at this some more, but getting the questions answered before we get here. And my biggest would definitely be content and how we're going to handle that. Residents of Gilbert have had issues in the past with signage for Victoria's Secret, let's say. So that would be something that I would be concerned with. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Mayor, that's a great question, one that comes up. And I can tell you, I'm going to take this because I want to sing the praises of Hillary, who handles that for us right now with Valley Metro Rail. And Mike Manow and I get involved in every once in a while very interesting discussions about that very issue about content. I will say this, which you may or may not know, we work very closely with the City of Phoenix on content issues. The Valley Metro Rail and the City of Phoenix jointly developed a guidance, a guideline, and we're very much almost totally in sync with the approach they take on their bus advertising. We apply to the rail advertising. And if there are issues, like you said, where there is an ad that comes in that we have questions, Hillary does a great job of reaching out to her counterparts in the City of Phoenix. And we talk about it. We utilize their expertise and their experience on their side. They run questions past us. So we are very much engaged together. And what I think we've developed a pretty good and consistent approach to managing content that I believe is fair. It's within the guidelines of court cases. Phoenix has also had the great experience of getting involved in some court cases involving, I think that was primarily bus stops and things. So this has developed over the years, and I will say that our partners in Phoenix have been a great help for us, and Hillary just does a great job in doing that. That doesn't mean that we don't get some fairly challenging requests. They come in about every couple, 3 months, especially as we expand things. You brought up one example. We have other things, whether it be, things that may be legal, but you may wonder, placement, those kind of things. And we really do a good job of trying to make sure that people's constitutional rights are maintained, but we maintain a basic standard. So far, knock on wood, so good, and we will continue, if we do the bus, that same approach and that same program of coordination with the city, and so that all of our advertising standards are fairly consistent. Not fairly, they are consistent.
Okay. Anybody else have any last comments or concerns? So I want to echo Robin's comments. Obviously I'm supportive of moving forward, getting more information, obviously being mindful that, one of our key players, the City of Phoenix is not represented by the mayor today. So I definitely want to make sure that, she has an opportunity to weigh in on this conversation. So Scott, please make sure that you guys reach back out to the mayor in moving forward. So looking at the—
And we will, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, looking at the chat here, it looks like there's a good number of representatives that are in favor of moving forward, cautiously moving forward, as long as the concerns that they're bringing up are addressed. Is there anybody out there that is adamantly opposed to not moving forward with looking into this? Okay.
Okay.
So
Mr.
Scott,
Chair,
it looks like you have some consensus here from the board to move forward and bring back at a future meeting a presentation highlighting advertising on the bus on the fixed routes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and boards, I should say, or boards since it's RPTA.
Yes.
We will move forward, and just to reiterate, a couple of questions I know that we need to get more detailed on is, number one, the contract and the possibility of RFP or expanding that or looking for new vendors and how that would work. We'll also do some more research with the cities, specifically as Councilmember Erdogan Savage said, with the City of Tempe, which seems to be the most stringent, but we'll work with those staffs. And we'll continue conversations, which we've already had with the City of Phoenix about their experience specifically on buses. And we'll bring these back to you with, I guess what we will have is some specific proposals as far as not only yes or no on advertising, but maybe some guidelines and restrictions and guidance as to where placement and the types of advertising that we would put on our buses. And we'll come back with you after addressing this. I think I covered all the issues the specifics that came up. If I missed one, please let me know, but I think I've covered them.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, item number 6 is future agenda items. Is there any member of the committee that has an agenda item that they'd like to have on a future meeting? Okay. The next meeting is going to be on Thursday, May 20th at 11:15. This is going to conclude the RPTA meeting. Meeting is adjourned, and I'm going to turn it over to the Valley Metro or the Valley Rail.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. We'll get started in about a minute. Give folks to log off here.
Chair, it looks like we're ready to go.
Ready?
And just as a reminder, Jesus Sapien will be representing the city of Phoenix today for Valley Metro Rail.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. Welcome everybody to Valley Metro Rail meeting. Item number 1, public comment. For today's meeting, public comments being taken in written format and will be entered into the official minutes of the meeting. Item number 2, the minutes for March 18, 2021 board meeting as presented for approval. Request a motion and a second to approve the board meeting
So moved,
minutes.
Chair.
Second.
Thanks, Robin. Second, Mayor Harkey. All in favor, say aye.
Bye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 3, the consent agenda is presented for action. Anybody on the committee have any questions or comments on anything on the consent agenda? Hearing none, request a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda and for the items to the board of directors for approval.
So moved.
So moved, Chair. Second.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good go,
All
Mayor.
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 4, future agenda items, requests and report. Anyone have any agenda items that they want to include in the future meeting? Hearing none. Perfect. Next meeting, Thursday, May 20th, 11:15. Thank you, everybody.
All right, good job. Thanks, Frankie.
Fastest meeting ever. Well done.
Ever. Love it.
Perfect. Very efficient
Right up
here.
my
So
alley.
thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Hey, thank